Back, everyone. Hope you're doing amazing. One of the oldest civilizations of Europe. You ready? Kings and generals, of course. Let's jump right in, shall we?
The island of Sardinia is situated in the center of the Western Mediterranean. An idyllic locale, it is today known for its sunny Gulf ports.
So it looks like we're going to be talking about Sardinia, Nuraghi, the Nuragic people. So we're talking about
Fine weather and scenic mountains. While today a part of the nation of Italy, the people of Sardinia have long had a proud independent streak, as well as their own unique culture, language, and history. The most ancient origins of Sardinia's unique past can be seen in the Nuraghi, the ancient stone formations found throughout the island, which predate even the ancient Romans, and serve as the symbol of the homonymous Nuragic civilization. This industrious and sublime culture flourished during the Bronze and Early Iron Ages from approximately 2300 to 500 BCE. The Nuragic people constructed large tombs of various kinds, built elaborate stone structures, and traded rare goods with the entirety of the Mediterranean.
Never heard of these people until just now.
Their millennia-long residence on the second largest Mediterranean island, they became one of the most important unsung heroes of the region and the pride of every modern Sardinian. Who were the Nuragic peoples?
I don't know.
Why did they build their massive structures? And when did they pass the torch
Kind of like a hill fort, but without the hill.
to their Sardinian successors? Welcome to our video on the culture and history of the Nuraghi.
Let's go.
Do you know we're perfect to the rework freebooks in possible?
Thrived on Sardinia. The ancient Nuragic civilization that thrived on Sardinia before the coming of the Romans derives its name from the over 7,000 megastructures known as Nuraghis that are situated around the island.
Makes sense.
The etymology of Nuraghi is of unknown origins and still debated to this day. The Nuragic civilization left no written records for us to decipher, with the exception of some drawings that might be inscriptions, leaving us with precious little insight about their language and culture. The Nuraghi appear to have originated in Sardinia after the Neolithic Stone Age, around 4,500 years ago. These prehistoric peoples lived in small settlements and possessed a similar style of pottery to those of the Beaker culture, a name used to describe populations in Western and Central Europe during the 2800s to 2300s
So that could beg a question of trade, right?
BCE. This prehistoric population was already skilled in some of the crafts that would define the later Nuraghi.
And one thing I always think about when I look at maps and think about old societies is, are the shorelines the same? That's such a huge thing that a lot of times we don't think about. It's like where at some point there was probably a land bridge between Corsica and Sardinia, probably hundreds of thousands of years ago, but maybe was it tens of thousands of years ago? This could be the case as well, like a shallow shoal. You got to think there's got to be a reason that they ended up in Sardinia. But if they ended up in Sardinia, they could easily not be in Sardinia. But they also could be seafaring people. Like we know the Polynesians were vast seafaring people. So this is no different in the regard of travel. I'm just thinking out loud right now.
Namely the production of metals. Some copper smelting, already present in the previous century,
Very important stuff.
is attested in some of the tombs from this era, which have copper daggers in them. In addition, obsidian, which the Nuraghi would later trade with the whole of the Mediterranean, was also being worked during this period.
Okay.
This suggests that trade with the surrounding Western Mediterranean was happening as early as this period.
Had to been.
Of note is the connection that the Nuraghi had with their northerly siblings in the island of Corsica, where modern excavations have revealed similar megastructures.
Makes sense.
Archaeologists are not certain to what extent the prehistoric peoples of Sardinia and Corsica were related, but there were evident cultural connections between the two islands back then, as there are today. In any case, The early Nuragi seemed to be a highly regionalized culture, with each part of Sardinia seeming to have their own unique form of metalworking techniques and burial practices. In the 2000s BCE, it seems that the first megastructures that would gain the name Nuragi began to be constructed. These were slow processes, as settlements became larger over time. They would soon blossom into one of the most interesting and complex cultures of the Bronze Age, with the most intriguing architecture, trade relations, and beliefs. Throughout the 1800s BCE, an explosion of Nuragi construction took place throughout the south of Sardinia, with over 180 of them appearing during.
So it seems like they're very much like more or less networks of families and settlements versus like a centralized city, like a metropolitan area. Obviously, during this time, that was very rare anyway. So I'm just wondering, was there like one that was like centralized, or how was it more like polities with chieftains? Probably the latter.
This period. These structures are known to archaeologists as early proto-Nuragi, and took the form of large fortress-like structures that were usually built on strategic high ground.
As we see all through Europe and Britain and everywhere else.
Other settlements, like open villages or cave dwellings, also appeared during this period, but they were small in number in comparison to the Nuragi themselves. This irregularity in architecture suggests that while they constituted one common culture, the Nuragi people had a form of decentralized social organization, as there
Obviously.
is no hierarchy of larger and smaller Nuragi, like.
Which should also beg a question of how many times did they not agree with each other, and what did that lead to? Skirmishes or disagreements and possible battles of some sort. Raids. Maybe not like a constructed battle, but maybe like raids and skirmishes for sure.
In later periods. It is unclear what purpose the Nuragi stone structures fulfilled in Nuragi society. It appears that they were mostly used for habitation, as archaeological evidence from the early layers of sites like Duos Nuragis show that agriculture and animal husbandry took place near the Nuragi. Bones of animals, like cattle, found inside parts of Nuragi also speak to the use of animal pens in these sites. Thus, these settlements may have been used by clans or extended family groupings.
Clans is a really good word. I was looking for that one earlier.
To conduct their economic and social affairs during this period. Between the 18th and 13th centuries BCE, there appears to have been an increase in settlements in both the uplands and lowlands of Sardinia, which suggests that the population of Sardinia increased, and they began to produce more to sustain themselves, a testament to the Nuragic people's industriousness. In addition to expanding social activities, ritual developments took place during this period. For instance, archaeologists have noted the increase in the usage of massive collective tombs, called Tomb di Giganti, or Tombs of the Giants.
Tombs of the Giants. So there's big tombs with a lot of people in it? Would you almost call them mass graves? Or would they just be more shrined?
These large tombs likely housed family or clan burials, and
Okay, it's like a mausoleum of some sort.
were used alongside other forms of burial, such as smaller cemeteries. In addition to this, the Nuragic people also used the so-called hypogia, or underground cut structures, which were utilized in burials and possibly other ritual activities. In some of these tombs, copper weapons from as far as Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean have been found, suggesting that the Sardinians of the time were deeply embedded in pan-Mediterranean trade networks.
And now that doesn't always mean that they're the ones going out. They could just be like an isolationist society that open trade up to bigger societies like Egypt or some of the Bronze Age cultures of the East.
This brings us to the economic activities of the Nuragi, which were rather substantial. Besides the usage of new kinds of pottery appearing throughout the island, the Nuragi also developed their production of tin and obsidian. These valuable Nuragic goods appear in ancient Bronze Age dig sites throughout parts of Iberia and southern France. All in all, The Proto-Nuragic period was one of slow but substantial innovations in social, political, and cultural organization for the island of Sardinia. These innovations would prove vital for the high points of Nuragic history later in the Bronze Age. The 13th to 10th centuries BCE marked something of a golden age for the Nuragic culture, presiding over an explosion in the construction of sophisticated stone citadels.
Okay, so we are upgrading for real. Okay. I didn't even think he showed that in the beginning. This is interesting. So now we got stone citadels, which are formidable to possible invaders. And I wonder if like there was a reason to build these, or is it just because of something environmental? What is it? What's the reason to start building these?
And settlements throughout Sardinia. In the eastern Mediterranean, the 13th to 10th centuries BCE is typically seen as the Bronze Age collapse,
Correct.
a period when the civilizations of the Hittites, Egyptians, and Mycenaean Greeks underwent severe catastrophe and collapsed due to the invasion of the marauding sea peoples or various natural disasters. However, while trade systems in the east collapsed during this time, those in the west continued to flourish. Indeed, throughout the so-called Bronze Age collapse, the Nuragi increased their exports to the east,
Power vacuum.
as well as to their Sicilian, Iberian, and North African neighbors. The economic growth of the island manifested itself in
I
the
guess he did show that. I just didn't realize it.
booming development of ever more complex Nuragi all over Sardinia. In addition to this development, the settlements around the Nuragi themselves expanded, suggesting that increasing commercial prosperity had led to increasing population growth. The exact nature of the Nuragic political organization in this period is unclear. Each Nuragi may have been ruled by a caste of social elites, or governed via a more egalitarian system. It's here that we should take a step back and discuss the different varieties of Nuragic structures that were built in Sardinia during this time. The most common type of stone structure that emerged in the 13th century BCE was that of the single-towered Nuragi, which was essentially one large tower structure with some surrounding constructions.
Very simple. Very simple. I don't even think this would be a dwelling, would it?
Besides this, there were also other, more complex Nuragi. These consisted of multiple towers and even some courtyards, and were much
Kind of like trying to mirror the medieval castles, but way before that.
larger in size than
Way
their
before
single
that.
tower counterparts. The third type of Nuragi was the Nuragi Kapane, which had their own courtyard next to the individual tower that
Now that is interesting.
forms the core of
That is like, you got to think about like how long it took like Europe to catch up with this.
the site. These structures were sometimes close to each other, probably forming larger administrative or economic networks, with smaller Nuragi being subservient to larger ones.
Almost similar to kind of like how we look at castles in Japan during the Sengoku period, where we see like some places being more of like sentries and then strongholds in the middle.
Within these settlements, the same economic practices of animal husbandry, agriculture, and metal and obsidian production continued to take place, much as they had in the 18th century BCE. It should also be noted that the Nuragi of the 13th century BCE and onwards begin bearing a passing resemblance to the Tori towers in Corsica and the Talayot structures of the Balearic Islands. Given the proximity of these islands, it is possible that
I mean, they definitely talk to each other, so I mean, they could definitely have trade secrets if anything else.
the ancient Sardinians, Corsicans, and Balearinos would have cultural affinities of this sort, speaking to the interconnectedness of the Western Mediterranean during this period and throughout the Bronze Age. The 10th to 8th centuries BCE brought about some interesting changes in the cultural practices of the Nuragic people. During this period, the construction of the Nuragi structures seems to have come to a halt, with very few of the over 7,000 Nuragi on the island of Sardinia having been built during this period. What happened instead was the continuous renovation of existing structures.
That makes sense though. Like if you have a dwelling, why build another? If it's made out of this material, an everlasting material.
This slowing down of nuragic construction is not reflective of economic decline.
No.
In fact, in sanctuaries around the island, the numbers of offerings in ritual shrines increase during the early Iron Age. Scholars have interpreted this as a way for elites to show their wealth and status through their offerings, a sort of holy competition of gifts. The mobility of the nuragic peoples across the Mediterranean continued during this period, as they continued to trade with the tapestry of vibrant civilizations beyond their shores throughout the early Iron Age. It appears that the nuragic elites of the period solidified their control over society. The towers of some nuragi, like the one in the site of Toskovo, show substantial investment in defense.
I had him in for a reason.
When combined with the hierarchy of smaller and larger nuragic settlements being analogous to states, this defensive investment may have been driven by local rulers who solidified their position at the top of the social hierarchy. Whatever the case, Sardinia continued to be a politically decentralized island, with each nuragi forming its own political unit, with larger nuragis occasionally taking smaller nuragis into their orbit.
Very similar, like I said, to Japan's medieval period. It seems like in terms of like sphere of influence of builds.
Because this period is the most recent in nuragic history, archaeologists have a clearer understanding of how these states, if they can be called as such, functioned.
Apologies.
Nuragic settlements during this period, and the previous one, can be divided into Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 settlements. Class 1 settlements are the smallest, usually consisting only of individual towers. Next are Class 2 settlements, which have more complexity, such as a larger courtyard and more buildings. Finally, there are Class 3 settlements, which have multi-towered buildings and are surrounded by large villages. It can be summarized
Seems like the political administrative hub would be Class 3, and then the other two would be engulfed within its Class 3's sphere of influence, right?
that the size of the nuragi corresponded to its place in the hierarchy in these regional states. The larger nuragi were also divided into districts, in which the different economic activities took place, with dedicated districts for farming, tin production, and other industries. These settlements made extensive use of the surrounding farmland for mixed-use farming of both animals and crops, showing that there was sufficient food for people to specialize in the production of rare materials. We'll now discuss the society and religion of the nuragi.
I imagine it's, similar to like how we see a lot of the early Celtic societies and Germanic societies.
Topics that are as fascinating as they are complex and mysterious. Archaeologists claim that, for the most part, the nuragi likely organized themselves based on family or kinship-based clans. Beyond this very basic level, the political organization of the nuragi seems to have been regional in nature, with parts of the island being run by social elites. It is still
I'm also wondering with the different topography of Sardinia, if those environmental factors changed how people interacted with each other.
debated whether the nuragi were firmly stratified societies with a social elite ruling over a lower class, or were communal and egalitarian in nature, with the latter only recently being suggested by scholars. The more elusive part of this social structure is whether there were prominent castes of warriors, priests, or merchants that were in charge of parts of social life in Sardinia.
Or maybe you wore multiple hats.
Whatever the case, the nuragi were notorious throughout the Mediterranean for their metal industry, particularly the tin that they exported
Oh, that's easy for bronze then.
throughout the region. This trade meant that they were also rather capable in their seafaring capabilities. It is
I mean, that doesn't mean that, but it could mean that they're more of a port society versus a seafaring society, unless that we can guarantee the latter.
possible that some nuragi were part of the notorious Sea Peoples who raided the eastern Mediterranean during the late Bronze Age, but this is difficult to prove. Intriguingly, southern Sardinian sites have revealed Mycenaean pottery from Greece from approximately 1200 BCE, which means that the nuragi peoples probably had regular commercial and cultural links with the ancient Greeks. The religion of the Nuragi people is elusive, but very interesting. Water was an important part of their ritual practices, as sacred
Similar to others.
springs and even ritual saunas, where water worship occurred, are found in important parts of the island. In these shrines, various small bronze statuettes are found. These statuettes are some of the most common and distinctive artifacts of the Nuragi, particularly the figures with horned helmets and spectacular
That's interesting.
beards. We do not know who the people these figures depicted were, or what they did, with some believing they represented important people in Nuragi society,
Others
and
could be
others
gods.
postulating they represented deities.
Yeah. I mean, probably deities, right?
Scholars speculate that various shrines had distinct regional or individual cults, with many possibly being dedicated to female deities. It is possible that these regional, polytheistic cults dominated the lives of the average Nuragi. The giants' tombs and structures like the hypogea also show a complex spiritual life. In these structures, scholars speculate that rituals that highlighted spiritual family bonds took place. It's difficult to know more than that, as we have very few other sources on Nuragic religion. What we can say is that the Nuragi were as sophisticated in their supernatural beliefs as they were in their metallurgical and nautical skills. The Iron Age was well underway by the 800s BCE, and by that time, the Orient was knocking on Sardinia's door. Phoenician and later Punic and Greek colonies began to appear on the island slowly from the 900s onwards,
And what happened?
taking some of the lucrative Gulf ports of the island under their control. The Nuragi persisted in the hinterland of the island and mixed in with the newcomers, but
Okay.
conflict between the natives and the colonial newcomers also occurred.
So, as we can tell, colonialism has never been a new thing, even in the 1400s.
In the 480s BCE, the Carthaginians tried to invade the island, but were unsuccessful in their attempts. Nevertheless, the south of the island came under direct Punic control under the reign of Hannibal Mago in the late 400s BCE, and this remained the case until the end of the First Punic War in 238 BCE. Sardinia was then annexed by the Roman Republic, alongside the island of Corsica.
I wonder when the Romans came there, were there any Nuragi people still?
Even as the Romans came to dominate the coastal regions of Sardinia, the native Nuragi continued to persist on the hinterlands of the island, and continued
Wow.
to mix in with Roman, Greek,
There you go.
Phoenician, and Punic
Wow,
settlers
interesting.
for centuries to come. As late as the 1st century CE, the famous
Wow.
geographer Strabo mentions an interior culture on the island of Sardinia similar to the Nuragi.
That's cool.
After that, however, the traces of the Nuragi end in history.
I wonder if it had to do with the Roman Empire or somebody persecuting.
Their structures continued to be used by various groups of subsequent inhabitants, and they were renovated and repurposed in new ways. Nevertheless, the Latinization of Sardinia was complete by the time of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th century CE. Still, the local identity of the island remained distinct from the rest of the Latin-speaking world, a testament to the insularity of Sardinia and its size as a distinct part of the Mediterranean that once encompassed the Nuragic culture. By the end of the Roman period, the Nuragic culture had been mixed into the waves of history. Sardinia would continue on its journey through history with the Vandal, Byzantine, and later Spanish periods, and even developed its own independent states during the Middle Ages, known
Yeah.
as the Judiciates. Eventually, Sardinia became one of the hubs of Italian unification, but never forgot its autonomous streak in language and society. Today, average Sardinians have a deep respect for the thousands of Nuragi that adorn their island, a culture
As they should.
which was uniquely Sardinian. Amongst the sunny beaches and mighty mountains, the remnants of this civilization have been a part of every Sardinian's life and times, a testament to the island's unique history. The Nuragi were an important part of the history of Sardinia, but also of the entire Mediterranean. They stand as tall as their Nuragi structures, proud, solid, and ever so timeless. More videos
As always, guys, these videos really open my eyes when it comes to like So much out there that we don't know until we know, right? So I mean, just like a lot of the native societies in South America, North America, and Europe, there's places always where people were before people dominated and came. It's great that we have some of these stone structures, and that's the thing about stone, right? They pretty much last forever. Stone allows us to see through lens that we would rather not see if it was made out of some other material. But it's awesome that we know so much about this faded past. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace out. Bye bye.